I'll make a small story, and I think this is a story which has gone through many eyes and reading here and there. It's about 1492. We call it the fall of Granada. 1492, the fall of Granada. There's a preceding 7 to 8 years, centuries of civilization in Europe, when the Moors, the loosely called Arabs, or the Abbasid dynasty from the tip of Iran and Iraq, was transferring the knowledge of Asia to the Cordova of Emirate. So all the knowledge, mathematics to culinary habits, the way you cook today in a kitchen, from tapestry to you compose a music, was getting transferred to West Europe. Till that point of time, you can check from history till about 13th, 14th century, Europe was never known as Europe. It was known as Andalusia, which means the end of Asia. So the tip of Iberia, Spain and Portugal, was known as And-al-Usia, which means the end of Asia. So Asia Minor was India, China, Persia. Asia Major, Asia Major. I'm getting excited to sit next to Sai, so I'm making mistakes. And Asia Minor is Anatolia, that's Turkey. And it goes up to Italia, which is Italy, so they're bearing the same names. And then finally Andalusia, which is Iberia. What happened in the Judeo-Islamic line of civilization, there was a conflict which was also going with the other line of the three Semitic religions, which is the Judeo-Christian. And that was opening up crusades at both ends of Europe. One was Iberia, I'm making the story smaller, and one was Constantinople. So between 1453 to 1493, there was a change in the fulcrum. I mean, it's like a Libra. And what happened? The Islamic supremacy of Europe in the West went down, and it slipped out of the hands and went into the hand of the Frankish kings. And then the other thing happened on the side, which is Constantinople. The Christian supremacy in Byzantium went into the hand of the Ottoman Turks. This is the backdrop. And then the entire Christian civilization in Iberia, including France, sort of absorbed and downloaded the entire Oriental wisdom and developed a vocabulary of science, technology, culture, and everything. And then the expedition started, which was sponsored by Ferdinand and Isabelle, the Coloniality, which is whole of size concern. And we have people like the Basques coming to India, which is Vasco, and Vasco da Gama and Magellan. And there was one guy, a very interesting person, who read the Indian scripts and saw that the earth is not really flat, it's actually round. So he wanted to reach the Indies taking the western route. That's Christopher Columbus. And that's why we call the early Native Americans as Indians, and by mistake, and correcting the mistake, that today they are known as Red Indians. Now that's the whole story. So when 100 years fast forward, these people come to India, the Portuguese, the Jesuit monks on the Konkan coast, about 1590 onward till about 1620, they, in a series of about 10 to 15 years, started observing fantastic similarities between the words that they brought in from Europe and that they find in India. I think you're all aware of it. Simple words like three, which means three, and khetra, which is a four square, which means four, quadro, and pancham, which is pentet. But very powerful words like the sarpa, which is a serpent, and then more scientific words like the jara, a three, which is the geriatrics, which is the science of old age, and asti pathi, which becomes osteopathy, and so on and so on, and padhatri, which becomes pediatrics. So they're very worried, 16th, 17th century. And this worry had two branches. One was linguistics and other was political economical. But they're looking for an answer. I'm making the brief, very quick. And then they found out a very interesting word in the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, also partly in the Atharva Veda, but mostly in the Rig Veda, which is Arjo. And they saw different expressions of these special people with certain noble ideas, but having a bearing with colors of consciousness, which they interpreted to be skin colors, the colonial rulers. And when the colonial supremacy on Asia was gaining prominence, and the GDP of Asia as a whole, which was highest till about the 15th century, was collapsing, then the colonial rulers needed a theory, they needed a ism, they needed some kind of a package through which they could prove that about a few thousand years prior to the British and the Portuguese and the Dutch and the Germans coming to the Orient, there probably one earlier branch of Caucasus people who had either come from Europe and waiting in the steppes, or from the steppes they had moved to Europe at some point of time, and they're pretty nomadic, pretty barbaric. But when they enter Iran, and particularly India, they all of a sudden become civilized. They start meditating, they start composing the sutras, and they formulate the language that they're speaking in the steppes, the Proto-Sanskrit, into a more formulated form of Sanskrit. And then some archaeologists like Montgomery Wheeler and others saw some archaeological evidence of some destruction in the Indus Valley. And then they say this must be an invasion which was caused by the people coming from the steppes. So much before we are coming to the Orient and re-civilizing Asia, and particularly India, there is a history in the passage of time about 3,000 years back. And they had a very interesting time period based on the biblical Asher Lightfoot chronology of about 5,000 BC and nothing before that, by calculating the years of the Bible. And so they had to package everything within 2000 BC because it coincided with the Greek civilization and the dates of Buddha and Confucius and Lao Tzu in China. And they forged, they manipulated, and they organized a very interesting theory of a group of people, a huge horde of people coming from the Caucasus and invading Asia. The Aryans by skin, the Aryans by genetics, the Aryan by apartheid, and Aryan by colonization. And this became the Aryan invasion theory.